The alternative facts moment on January 22, 2017, wasn't a slip of the tongue. It was a declaration of war on objective reality. When Chuck Todd pressed her about Sean Spicer's obvious lies about inauguration crowd size, Conway didn't just deflect. She introduced a concept so audacious, so Orwellian, that even seasoned journalists didn't know how to respond. Alternative facts became more than a phrase. It became permission for an entire administration to lie without consequence. Spin can't survive specifics, Crockett would tell her team during late-night prep sessions. When someone's lying, they keep it vague. They talk in circles. They flood you with words but no details, so you hit them with specifics, dates, times, direct quotes, documents. You make the lie so specific they can't wiggle out. Let's start simple, Crockett continued, her voice maintaining that dangerous calm. Miss Conway, on January 23, 2017, did you tell NBC News that the White House had alternative facts regarding inauguration crowd size? Conway's face crumpled. The woman who'd never admitted a single wrongdoing, who'd deflected every accusation for years, sat before Congress with tears streaming down her face, her career in ruins, her legacy defined not by her spin, but by the truth she'd tried so hard to hide. Political Twitter transformed into something between a celebration and a comedy show. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez tweeted a simple, that got 300,000 likes in an hour. Ted Lieu posted, I was there. It was even more devastating in person. Bernie Sanders' account shared the clip with, this is what accountability looks like. Even Republicans who'd spent years defending Conway went silent. Their Twitter feeds suddenly focused on local constituent services and upcoming prayer breakfasts. Get ready for the most shocking content on the internet. Subscribe to Shockfiler now and join the Shockfiler community that's not afraid to dive into the unknown. Shockfiler. Let's get this shockwave started. The beginning of this extraordinary day. 2 hours earlier, the Rayburn House office building was buzzing with an electricity usually reserved for celebrity trials or presidential impeachments. This wasn't just another congressional hearing. This was a reckoning 5 years in the making. The House Committee on Oversight and Reform had finally decided to tackle what everyone else had been too afraid to touch. The systematic dismantling of truth in American politics. And at the center of their investigation sat the woman who'd given us the phrase that defined an era: alternative facts. Kellyanne Conway's 2 words had done more damage to objective reality than any foreign disinformation campaign ever could. Think about it. When the counselor to the President of the United States stood before the American people and declared that lies were simply alternative facts, she didn't just spin a story. She broke something fundamental in our democracy. She gave permission for powerful people to create their own realities, to dismiss any inconvenient truth as just one option among many. And for 5 years, she'd gotten away with it. The committee's investigation had uncovered a pattern so disturbing that even seasoned politicians were shaken. Internal memos showing coordinated campaigns to spread disinformation. Strategy documents outlining how to flood the zone with lies until truth became impossible to find. Training materials teaching government officials how to deflect, deny, and deceive. This wasn't just politics as usual. This was an assault on the very concept of objective reality. But here's where Conway made her fatal mistake. She walked into that hearing room like she owned it. Dressed in her signature designer suit, hair perfectly coiffed, that practiced smile that never quite reached her eyes. She'd testified before Congress dozens of times. She'd sparred with the best journalists in the business and always emerged unscathed. Her confidence wasn't just visible, it was theatrical. You could see it in the way she glad-handed committee members before the hearing started, the way she laughed a little too loudly at Chairman Raskin's awkward joke, the way she arranged her papers with the casual efficiency of someone who'd done this dance so many times it had become boring. She even winked at a reporter she recognized, as if to say, "Watch me work my magic again." Conway had prepared for this hearing the way she'd prepared for every other appearance, with talking points, deflection strategies, and that maddening ability to answer questions without actually answering them. She expected Democrats to grandstand, Republicans to protect her, and the whole thing to blow over by the next news cycle. Just another day at the office for Washington's most accomplished gaslighter. What she didn't expect was Jasmine Crockett. C, while Conway was practicing her sound bites and perfecting her condescending smile, the freshman congresswoman from Texas had been doing something else entirely. Something Conway couldn't have imagined in her wildest dreams. For weeks, Crockett had been building a case like the prosecutor she used to be. Not with rhetoric or righteous indignation, but with something far more dangerous: evidence. Conway thought she was walking into a political theater where she'd written the script. She had no idea Crockett had done her homework. She had no idea that every lie had been cataloged, every contradiction documented, every alternative fact matched with its inconvenient truth. She had no idea that in just under 2 hours, her entire house of cards would come crashing down in front of a live national audience. The stakes couldn't have been higher. This wasn't just about embarrassing a former Trump official. This was about whether America could find its way back to a shared reality, whether truth still mattered, whether consequences still existed for those who poisoned our democracy with lies. The hearing was about to begin, and Kellyanne Conway was about to learn what happens when spin meets substance. Conway's calculated image. While Conway perfected the art of deception, it's important to understand how she became Washington's most dangerous spin doctor. Because Kellyanne Conway didn't stumble into her role as America's gaslighter-in-chief, she crafted it with the precision of a surgeon and the morality of a con artist. Her technique was deceptively simple: never admit, always redirect. Where other political operatives would occasionally concede a point to maintain credibility, Conway discovered that if you never gave an inch, if you treated every question as an attack and every fact as negotiable, you could create your own reality. And for 4 years, she turned the White House briefing room into her personal laboratory for testing the limits of truth. Watch any Conway interview from that era. Really watch it, and you'll see a masterclass in manipulation. A reporter asks about a specific lie the president told. Conway responds by attacking the media's bias. Pressed for evidence to support a false claim, she pivots to Hillary's emails or Obama's failures. Confronted with video proof contradicting her statement, that's when she'd deploy her nuclear option. You're looking at this all wrong. The alternative facts moment on January 22, 2017, wasn't a slip of the tongue. It was a declaration of war on objective reality. When Chuck Todd pressed her about Sean Spicer's obvious lies about inauguration crowd size, Conway didn't just deflect. She introduced a concept so audacious, so Orwellian, that even seasoned journalists didn't know how to respond. Alternative facts became more than a phrase. It became permission for an entire administration to lie without consequence. But Conway's genius, if you can call it that, lay in her delivery. She never raised her voice, never lost her composure. She'd tilt her head slightly, furrow her brow as if deeply concerned about being misunderstood, and then unleash a torrent of words designed to exhaust and confuse. She weaponized politeness, turned condescension into an art form, and made gaslighting look like reasoned discourse. Her history of controversial statements reads like a greatest hits album of democratic decay. Bowling Green Massacre, a terrorist attack that never happened, invented to justify a Muslim ban. Microwaves that turn into cameras, a bizarre claim designed to deflect from real surveillance concerns. COVID will be gone by April, a lie that contributed to hundreds of thousands of deaths. Each falsehood delivered with the same practiced sincerity, the same unshakable confidence. The media struggled to handle her. Fact-checkers couldn't keep up. By the time they'd debunked one lie, she'd told 5 more. She understood something fundamental about the modern information ecosystem. In a world of infinite content, The liar who never stops lying has a structural advantage over the truth teller who needs time to verify facts. And here's what made her truly dangerous. She believed her own hype. After years of besting journalists, of watching them sputter in frustration as she pirouetted around their questions, Conway had convinced herself she was untouchable. She'd internalized the lesson that if you never admit defeat, you can never be defeated. Every successful deflection reinforced her belief that she was simply smarter than everyone else in the room. This arrogance only grew after leaving the White House. While other Trump officials slunk away in disgrace or tried to quietly rehabilitate their images, Conway doubled down. She wrote a book painting herself as the victim, the reasonable voice in an unreasonable administration. She hit the speaking circuit, commanding 6 figures to teach corporate executives her dark arts. She even started appearing on mainstream media again, betting that America's short memory would forget her role in breaking our democracy. The rehabilitation tour was working. Profiles in major magazines portrayed her as a survivor of the Trump years. TV bookers, desperate for ratings, welcomed her back. She was 3 steps into her comeback when the Oversight Committee decided enough was enough. Someone needed to hold Kellyanne Conway accountable for her crimes against truth. But Conway wasn't worried. She'd faced congressional committees before. She knew most politicians were more interested in speech-making than fact-finding. She knew Republicans would protect her, and Democrats would grandstand. She knew how to run out the clock, how to filibuster with word salad, how to emerge unscathed from any interrogation. Walking into that hearing room, Kellyanne Conway believed she was still the smartest person in any room she entered. She believed her ability to manipulate language made her invincible. She believed that in a post-truth world, the best liar always wins. She was about to discover how wrong she was, because while she'd been perfecting the art of spin, someone else had been perfecting the art of destruction through documentation, and that someone was about to teach America's alternative facts Queen a lesson in actual facts. Crockett's preparation. While Conway perfected the art of deception, a young lawyer in Texas was perfecting something far more powerful, the art of methodical destruction, and through preparation. Jasmine Crockett didn't become the prosecutor who never lost a case by accident. She did it by understanding a fundamental truth that Conway had forgotten. In the end, facts are undefeated. Before Congress, before the viral moments, before the national spotlight, Crockett was a public defender in Dallas County who learned early that preparation wasn't just important, it was everything. When you're defending clients the system wants to throw away, when you're up against prosecutors with unlimited resources, you can't afford to wing it. You prepare like lives depend on it, because they do. Her colleagues still tell stories about Crockett's legendary preparation. While other lawyers relied on charisma or connections, Crockett built cases brick by brick. She'd spend entire weekends in the office, surrounded by boxes of documents, creating timelines that exposed police lies. She'd interview witnesses 3, 4, 5 times until she found the contradiction that would crack a case open. She once spent 72 straight hours preparing for a cross-examination, and when she finally got the cop on the stand, she destroyed him so thoroughly, the judge called a recess to compose himself. So when Crockett learned she'd be questioning Kellyanne Conway, she didn't celebrate or grandstand. She did what she'd always done. She went to work. But this time, her client wasn't a wrongfully accused teenager. Her client was the truth itself. For 6 weeks before the hearing, Crockett turned her congressional office into a war room. Every wall covered with timelines, transcripts, tweets. She assembled a team of researchers, but the real work, the detailed analysis, the pattern recognition, the connection of dots, that she did herself. Because Crockett understood something about liars that most people miss. They always tell on themselves if you pay close enough attention. She started with Conway's greatest hits, the obvious lies everyone remembered. But instead of focusing on the lies themselves, Crockett studied the technique. She mapped Conway's deflection patterns, timed her response delays, cataloged her physical tells. She discovered that Conway had exactly 7 different ways to avoid answering a question, and she prepared counters for each one. Spin can't survive specifics, Crockett would tell her team during late-night prep sessions. When someone's lying, they keep it vague. They talk in circles. They flood you with words but no details, so you hit them with specifics. Dates, times, direct quotes, documents. You make the lie so specific they can't wiggle out. The breakthrough came at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday, 3 weeks before the hearing. Crockett was reviewing Conway's financial disclosures, boring documents most people ignore, when she noticed something odd. Conway had reported income from a consulting firm that, according to its corporate filings, didn't exist until after she'd claimed to start working for them. It was a small lie, almost insignificant, but Crockett knew. Small lies lead to big ones. She pulled the thread. The fake consulting firm led to hidden payments. The hidden payments led to undisclosed meetings. The meetings led to emails. Emails Conway thought had been deleted, but which existed in other people's archives. And in those emails, Crockett found gold. Not just evidence of lies, but evidence that Conway knew she was lying. Emails where she laughed about fooling reporters. Messages where she strategized about how to muddy the waters on specific stories. A whole correspondence chain where she explicitly discussed creating alternative narratives to counter damaging truths. Conway hadn't just lied. She documented her lies. But Crockett didn't stop there. She knew Conway would try to claim the emails were taken out of context, so she built context. She created a timeline showing exactly when each email was sent, what Conway said publicly that day, and how the private admissions contradicted the public statements. She prepared visual aids that would make the contradictions impossible to deny. She rehearsed her questioning sequence dozens of times, anticipating every possible deflection. Her team watched in awe as Crockett transformed from prosecutor to professor, teaching them how to dismantle a professional liar. You don't attack the person, she explained. You attack the lie. You make the lie so obvious, so undeniable, that defending it becomes impossible. Then you watch them self-destruct trying. The night before the hearing, while Conway was probably practicing her talking points and picking out her camera-ready outfit, Crockett was doing something different. She was sitting alone in her office, surrounded by 6 weeks of work, visualizing exactly how the questioning would go. She'd war-gamed every scenario, prepared for every contingency. She knew Conway's patterns better than Conway knew them herself. As dawn broke over Washington on the day of the hearing, Jasmine Crockett closed her final binder and smiled. She'd done what she always did. She'd over-prepared to the point where victory wasn't just possible, it was inevitable. Conway thought she was walking into another performance. She was actually walking into an ambush, 6 weeks in the making. And the beautiful thing? Conway would never see it coming, because people who lie for a living always underestimate people who prepare for a living. The questioning begins. And then Congresswoman Crockett leaned into her microphone, and everything changed. But first, Conway had to perform her usual song and dance with the other committee members, a performance that would prove to be her last. The hearing began with Chairman Raskin's opening questions, straightforward queries about Conway's role in spreading disinformation. Conway responded with her signature move, the condescending smile, the slight tilt of her head, and then the flood. Chairman Raskin, I appreciate your question, but I think we need to establish what we mean by disinformation. Because from where I sat, we were providing important context that the mainstream media refused to acknowledge. 5 minutes. That's how long Conway spoke without actually answering the question. She weaved through attacks on media bias, references to the Russia hoax, complaints about congressional overreach, and somehow ended up talking about her children's soccer aims. Raskin, visibly frustrated, tried to reclaim his time, but Conway had perfected the art of talking through interruptions, her voice never rising, never stopping. Like a filibuster in human form. Representative Ocasio-Cortez went next, armed with receipts and righteous anger. But Conway was ready for her too. Every specific question got the same treatment. Acknowledge the Congresswoman's passion, compliment her enthusiasm, then pivot to completely unrelated talking points. When AOC pressed about specific false statements, Conway deployed her favorite weapon. I don't recall that specific conversation, but what I do recall is the media's determination to mischaracterize everything we said. You could see the frustration building in the room. Representatives who'd prepared careful questions watched helplessly as Conway turned each one into an opportunity for a mini speech about media persecution. She was playing her greatest hits: Coastal Elites, Forgotten Americans, Witch Hunt, while the clock ticked away. This wasn't testimony. It was performance art. Representative Jim Jordan tried to throw her a lifeline with softball questions about media bias against conservatives, and Conway grabbed it like a life preserver. She spent 8 minutes on a sympathetic monologue about the challenges of serving in government while facing constant character assassination. Jordan nodded along, playing his part in the choreographed dance of deflection. But in the second row of committee members, Jasmine Crockett sat perfectly still. She wasn't taking notes. She wasn't whispering to aides. She was watching, studying, like a hunter who knows that patience is more powerful than pursuit. Conway noticed her, of course. How could she not? While other representatives grew visibly agitated, Crockett remained calm. When Conway's eyes swept the room during her performances, they lingered on Crockett with visible dismissal. Here was a freshman congresswoman, barely 6 months into her first term. What could she possibly bring to this fight that seasoned politicians couldn't? The dismissal became more obvious as the hearing progressed. When Representative Khanna tried to pin Conway down on specific dates and times, Conway actually chuckled. Congressman, I admire your attention to detail, but I think we're missing the forest for the trees here. Another 10 minutes of word salad. Another question deflected. Another representative left sputtering. By the time they'd cycled through half the committee, a pattern had emerged. Conway had an answer for everything and a response to nothing. She turned the hearing into her own personal talk show, with congressional representatives reduced to frustrated audience members. Some Republicans were actually smiling, convinced their star witness was handling herself brilliantly. The clock showed they were 90 minutes into the hearing. Conway had been answering questions the entire time without providing a single substantive response. Her water glass was still full. She'd been talking so continuously she hadn't even paused for a sip. This wasn't just deflection, it was dominance. She was showing everyone in that room that she could not be cornered, could not be controlled, could not be caught. Finally, Chairman Raskin called on Representative Crockett. Conway's eyes flicked toward her with barely concealed amusement. The freshman's turn. Time to show this rookie how the game was played in the big leagues. Conway actually adjusted her posture, relaxing slightly, preparing for what she assumed would be another easily deflected assault. Miss Conway, Crockett began, her voice so quiet everyone had to lean in. I just have a few specific questions about some emails. Conway's smile flickered for just a moment. Emails? What emails? But she recovered quickly, launching into her standard opening. Congresswoman Crockett, I'm happy to discuss any communications, though I should note that taking emails out of context. I haven't shown you the emails yet, Crockett interrupted softly. The room went silent. Conway's mouth stayed open for a beat too long. And in that moment, the hunter became the hunted. The systematic destruction. I haven't shown you the emails yet, Crockett interrupted softly. The silence that followed was deafening. Conway's practiced smile froze on her face like a mask that had suddenly become too heavy to wear. Let's start simple, Crockett continued, her voice maintaining that dangerous calm. Miss Conway, on January 23rd, 2017, did you tell NBC News that the White House had alternative facts regarding inauguration crowd size? Conway relaxed slightly. This was familiar territory. Congresswoman, as I've explained many times, I was simply pointing out that there were additional facts and figures that the media wasn't considering. Yes or no, Miss Conway? Did you use the phrase alternative facts? A flash of irritation crossed Conway's face. Yes, but the context. Thank you. Crockett made a small mark on her paper. And on February 2nd, 2017, did you reference a Bowling Green massacre that never occurred? Conway's hands shifted on the table. That was a misstatement. I meant to say Bowling Green terrorists. But you said massacre, correct? Yes, but thank you. Another mark. Conway's jaw tightened. This freshman congresswoman was treating her like a hostile witness in a criminal trial. The condescension Conway had perfected for years was being turned against her, and she didn't like it one bit. Miss Conway, I'm going to show you an email from January 22nd, 2017, at 11:47 p.m. Crockett held up a printed page, and the committee's screens lit up with the same document. This is from your official White House account. Can you read the highlighted portion? Conway's eyes darted to the screen. The color began draining from her face as she read her own words. Chuck Todd bought the alternative facts line completely. We can use this framework to redefine any inconvenient story going forward. I don't recall this specific email. You don't recall writing this email from your own account, less than 12 hours after creating the phrase alternative facts. Crockett's voice remained steady, almost sympathetic. Let me refresh your memory with your follow-up email at 11:52 p.m. Another document appeared. Conway's hands were now visibly trembling as she read. The beauty is that once you introduce the concept that facts have alternatives, you've won. They'll spend all their time debating what's true instead of what matters. These emails may be taken out of context, Conway stammered, her voice losing its usual melody. Private communications often... Context? Crockett interrupted gently. Let's add context. Here's an email chain from February 1st, the day before you mentioned the Bowling Green massacre. The screen filled with messages. You wrote, quote, need a terrorism example to justify the travel ban. What about those Iraqi refugees in Bowling Green? Your assistant responded, they were arrested, no actual attack. Your reply, close enough. Who's going to fact-check in real time? Conway's face had gone from pale to flushed. These emails could be fabricated. Are you suggesting someone fabricated emails from your White House account with your digital signature that were preserved in the National Archives? Crockett's tone remained professionally curious, as if she were genuinely interested in Conway's theory. I'm not suggesting anything, I'm simply... Conway's voice cracked. The woman who never stopped talking was struggling to form sentences. Let's move on, Crockett said smoothly. March 2020. You told Americans that COVID-19 would disappear by April. But here's an email you sent to your daughter on March 15th. The most damaging document yet appeared on screen. Stock up on supplies now. This virus is going to devastate the country. At least 100,000 dead, maybe more. But we can't panic the markets. You can't. That's a private communication with my child. Conway's voice rose to a pitch no one had ever heard from her before. You're right, it was private, Crockett agreed. Which makes it more likely to be truthful, doesn't it? You told your daughter to prepare for devastation while telling America it would disappear. How many people died because they believed you, Miss Conway? I don't have to sit here and... Conway started to rise from her seat. Actually, you do, Crockett said firmly. You're under subpoena, and I'm not finished, Miss Conway. Conway sank back down, her composed facade completely shattered. Sweat beaded on her forehead. Her hands shook as she reached for her water glass, spilling some as she tried to drink. One last email, Crockett said, her voice now carrying a hint of steel. January 5th, 2021, the day before the Capitol riot. You wrote to a colleague, tomorrow's going to be wild. POTUS has them ready to storm the gates. I'm staying far away from downtown. That's not... I didn't mean... Conway's voice was barely a whisper now. You knew, Miss Conway. You knew violence was coming. You knew your lies about election fraud had consequences, and instead of warning anyone, you warned yourself to stay away. The hearing room was absolutely silent except for the sound of Conway's ragged breathing. The master manipulator, the woman who'd spent 4 years redefining reality, had been systematically destroyed by her own words. I have dozens more emails, Crockett said quietly, gesturing to the stack of papers in front of her. Would you like me to continue, or are you ready to finally tell the truth about something? Anything. That's when Conway snapped. You don't understand! She screamed, her voice raw and desperate. You don't understand what it was like! The pressure! The demands! I did what I had to do! No, Crockett responded, her calm a devastating contrast to Conway's hysteria. You did what you chose to do, and every choice is documented right here in your own words. Conway's face crumpled. The woman who'd never admitted a single wrongdoing, who'd deflected every accusation for years, sat before Congress with tears streaming down her face, her career in ruins, her legacy defined not by her spin, but by the truth she'd tried so hard to hide. Crockett gathered her papers slowly, deliberately. No further questions, Mr. Chairman. The destruction was complete, and it had taken exactly 18 minutes. The viral explosion. But this was bigger than one viral moment. This was about the future of truth itself. Within 30 seconds of Crockett gathering her papers, the first clip hit Twitter. A reporter from the Post had been recording on their phone, and their shaky footage of Conway screaming, "You don't understand!" was already racing past 10,000 retweets. The caption was simple. Holy shit. By the time Chairman Raskin called a recess, Conway had to be helped from the room by staffers. #Conway cracked wasn't just trending, it was dominating. The hashtag shot to #1 worldwide faster than any political moment in Twitter history. But this wasn't just American political junkies paying attention. The clip was being translated and shared in dozens of languages. The woman who'd gaslit America for 4 years had just been exposed on a global stage. MSNBC cut into regular programming. Breaking news. Kellyanne Conway admits to knowingly spreading disinformation. CNN's Chiron was more direct. Conway meltdown. Emails reveal pattern of deliberate lies. Even Fox News, after an awkward, hard 15-minute delay, had to acknowledge what had happened, though they framed it as Conway emotional during tough questioning. Political Twitter transformed into something between a celebration and a comedy show. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez tweeted a simple that got 300,000 likes in an hour. Ted Lieu posted, I was there. It was even more devastating in person. Bernie Sanders' account shared the clip with, this is what accountability looks like. Even Republicans who'd spent years defending Conway went silent. Their Twitter feeds suddenly focused on local constituent services and upcoming prayer breakfasts. The memes came fast and furious. Conway's shocked face, that moment when she realized Crockett had the emails, became instant internet gold. Within an hour, it had been photoshopped onto the Titanic hitting the iceberg, the Death Star exploding, and somehow, beautifully, replacing the surprised Pikachu face. Conway realizing actions have consequences became a meme format that would outlive us all. But the internet's creativity reached its peak with the video remixes. Someone set Conway's You Don't Understand to Beethoven's Fifth. Another genius synced her meltdown to the beat drop in Lose Yourself. The TikTok generation discovered the hearing, and suddenly teenagers were doing Conway challenge videos, dramatically screaming alternative facts before pretending to faint. Gen Z had turned governmental accountability into performance art. Legal Twitter, usually the driest corner of the platform, was having its own moment. Harvard law professors were breaking down potential perjury charges in viral threads. She testified under oath that she didn't recall emails she clearly wrote, one expert noted. That's not spin, that's a felony. Former prosecutors were explaining how Crockett's questioning technique should be taught in law schools. The phrase Crockett method was coined to describe the systematic destruction of a hostile witness through their own documentation. Media outlets scrambled to analyze what they'd just witnessed. The New York Times pushed out a breaking news alert. In dramatic hearing, Repriel Crockett exposes years of deliberate deception by Conway. The Washington Post's analysis called it the death of spin. Politico ran with how a freshman Democrat destroyed Trump's top gaslighter in 18 minutes. But perhaps the most telling response came from Conway's former allies. Republican senators who'd defended her for years suddenly couldn't remember her name. "I didn't see the hearing," became the GOP's official response, repeated by dozens of members who were literally tweeting during the testimony. Trump himself, never one to stand by a falling ally, Truth Socialed. Hardly knew Kellyanne Conway. She was a minor figure, maybe got coffee sometimes. Conservative media tried damage control, but their hearts weren't in it. Tucker Carlson attempted to frame it as an attack on conservative women, but even his audience could see the desperation. The Wall Street Journal editorial board, which had spent years sane-washing Conway's lies, published a piece distancing themselves. Miss Conway's regrettable admissions. The rats weren't just fleeing the sinking ship. They were pretending they'd never been aboard. By evening, the clip had been viewed over 100 million times across all platforms. News programs led with it. Late-night comedians rewrote their monologues. The Daily Show just played the entire 18-minute questioning unedited with the title card, "We literally cannot make this funnier than it already is." International news picked it up as a symbol of American democracy self-correcting. The BBC called it the day truth won. French newspapers ran headlines about la fin des alternative facts. Even Russian state media, masters of disinformation themselves, seemed impressed by Crockett's technique. But beyond the memes and the mockery, something profound was happening. Young people, who'd grown up in the alternative facts era, were seeing for the first time that lies could have consequences, that preparation could defeat propaganda, that truth, when wielded skillfully, was still the most powerful weapon in democracy's arsenal. The internet had turned Conway's destruction into entertainment, but the message was serious. The age of consequence-free lying was over. At least for today. Truth over spin. But this was bigger than one viral moment. This was about the future of truth itself. In the days following Conway's public demolition, something shifted in Washington. The Crockett method wasn't just a meme anymore. It was becoming a blueprint for how to fight back against the avalanche of disinformation that had buried our democracy. Political science professors scrambled to update their curricula. Georgetown's School of Public Policy announced a new course, Documentation as Democracy, the Crockett Approach to Accountability. Harvard's Kennedy School hosted emergency seminars on evidence-based oversight in the post-truth era. What Crockett had demonstrated wasn't just a takedown, it was a masterclass in how preparation could defeat even the most skilled propagandist. The lesson was deceptively simple. Liars depend on the assumption that no one will do the homework. They flood the zone with so much garbage that fact-checkers drown. They bet on exhaustion, on the media's need to both sides, every story, on the public's shortened attention span. But Crockett had shown that if you put in the work, if you collected the receipts, organized the evidence, and presented it methodically, the entire house of cards collapsed. Young congressional staffers took notice. Suddenly, oversight committees weren't just about grandstanding and sound bites. Preparation became the watchword. Staffers spent weeks building cases before hearings. They learned to anticipate deflection tactics and prepare counters. They stopped trying to win arguments and started building prosecutions. The age of performance politics was giving way to something more powerful. Competence. The shift was visible in real time. When oil executives testified about climate denial 2 weeks later, Representative Maxwell came armed with internal memos showing they knew about climate change in the 1970s. When pharmaceutical CEOs tried to explain price gouging, Senator Warren had receipts showing their bonuses tied to price increases. The Crockett method was spreading, and corporate liars were running out of places to hide. But the deeper lesson went beyond technique. What Crockett had really shown was that facts still mattered. if you knew how to use them. For years, conventional wisdom said we lived in a post-truth world where emotion trumped evidence. Conway herself had built a career on this premise. But Crockett proved that truth wasn't powerless. It had just been poorly wielded. Democracy dies in deception, but thrives in truth, Crockett said in a statement released the day after the hearing. For too long, we've accepted that lying is just part of politics. We've normalized the idea that powerful people can create their own reality. But lies are like a disease. They weaken the body politic until it can't function. The cure isn't more lies or better lies. It's truth, applied with precision and backed by evidence. The statement went viral. But more importantly, it went operational. Advocacy groups started building truth units dedicated to documentation and evidence gathering. Journalists moved beyond "he said, she said" repos, resorting to "here's what the documents show." The fact-checking industry evolved from reactive debunking to proactive investigation. The standard changed from "is this true?" to "here's proof it's false." Even more remarkably, the public responded. Polls showed that trust in Congress, historically abysmal, actually ticked up after the Conway hearing. Not because people suddenly loved politicians, but because they'd seen accountability in action. They'd watched someone powerful face consequences for lying. In a democracy starved for justice, even one serving was nourishing. The international implications were profound. Democratic movements worldwide studied the hearing. Activists in Brazil, fighting their own disinformation crisis, translated Crockett's questioning techniques. Opposition parties in Hungary and Poland adapted the method for their own struggles against authoritarian propaganda. The Crockett method became a global export, proof that American democracy could still teach the world something valuable. But perhaps the most important shift was generational. Young people who'd grown up swimming in an ocean of lies suddenly saw that truth could be a life raft. Law school applications surged. Journalism programs reported increased enrollment. A generation that had been told facts didn't matter anymore discovered that facts, properly deployed, were still democracy's best weapon. The Conway hearing became a turning point, but not because one liar was exposed. It mattered because it showed a way forward. In an age of infinite information and industrial-scale deception, the path to accountability wasn't through louder voices or cleverer spin. It was through patience, preparation, and the methodical presentation of evidence. Truth hadn't become more powerful overnight. We just remembered how to use it. And in that remembering lay the seeds of democracy's renewal. Outro call to action. Remember that moment when Kellyanne Conway's face crumbled, when years of carefully constructed lies collapsed in just 18 minutes. That wasn't just a viral clip or a satisfying takedown. That was democracy defending itself. That was proof that no matter how powerful the liar, how perfect the spin, how alternative the facts, truth armed with preparation will always win. One woman. 6 weeks of preparation. 18 minutes of questions. That's all it took to destroy 4 years of gaslighting. Jasmine Crockett didn't need to shout, didn't need to grandstand, didn't need to match Conway's energy. She just needed receipts, and she had them. But here's what should really blow your mind. Conway thought she was untouchable. She'd spent years perfecting her craft, defeating journalists, frustrating prosecutors, spinning reality into pretzels. She walked into that hearing room convinced she could outlast, outtalk, and outwit anyone. She never imagined someone would simply outprepare her. That quote is the lesson for all of us. Every day we face our own Kellyanne Conways, bosses who gaslight, politicians who lie, systems that depend on our exhaustion. They count on us being too tired, too busy, too overwhelmed to do the homework. They bet their power on our powerlessness. But what if we refused to play that game? What if instead of arguing with liars, we documented their lies? What if instead of getting frustrated by deflection, we prepared for it? What if we all became Jasmine Crockett's in our own lives, patient, prepared, and armed with receipts? The tools are there. The information exists. The evidence is waiting to be gathered. All it takes is someone willing to do the work. Someone who believes that truth still matters. Someone like you want to see more moments where preparation meets power, where truth defeats deception, where the gaslighters finally face the music. Subscribe now. Because in a world full of Kellyanne Conways trying to redefine reality, we need an army of Jasmine Crockett's ready to restore it. The revolution isn't just being televised, it's being documented. And the receipts are coming due.